will see if you go to Tulsa. You will see if you go to Tulsa, you will see a huge marble statue type of tablet that has on it all of the claims that were put in. My father sued for 7 years from 1921 until they were able to get a judge in 1928 to throw the case out of court. Because if the insurance company had paid him, they would have had to pay all the other people who held policies. And it wasn't only the insurance companies. The banks also took advantage of it. If you had lost your bank book in the fire, the bank claimed, as a Muskogee National Bank, claimed they had no records of you. And so nobody could even get their money out of the bank unless somehow their records had survived. I think that in those days there were very few people who felt they should just lie down and call it a day. They fought back, just the way my mother did. When the militia told her, you have to go, get out of that house, we can't protect you. And my mother responded to the machine gun captain, here, you take care of my baby while I put more water on my house. And that sort of is evidence of the kind of spirit they had, which was to don't give up and don't let anyone turn you around. Just keep on finding some way.
Wow. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, and I am the director for the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. You've just heard from the late Olivia Hooker, who was a survivor of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and I count it as an honor to represent her and all of the other survivors who are living in the descendants in this fight for repair, for respect, and for restitution. And so I want to just thank each and every one of you for just sharing a little bit of your time with us on tonight. We know that the most precious gift you can give anyone is your time. So thank you so much for your time. And so we're going to jump right into it. We have a very power-packed call for you on this evening. This is our town hall meeting. We do this every single month as we've filed a lawsuit for restitution for individuals like Olivia Hooker and Mother Randall and Mother Fletcher, and you'll hear from some more descendants on today. And so we want to just share with you briefly our 4-point mission statement for the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. And number one is we want financial compensation for the victims of the 1921 massacre and their descendants. Simple as that. Number two, accountability for the perpetrators of the 1921 massacre. Number three, we want to document and publicize stories of the 1921 massacre, the victims and their descendants. And number four, we want to tell the truth about what happened during and after the 1921 massacre and its continual effect on victims and their descendants. And so I want to just get some house cleaning business out of the way. I want you, if you have a pen and a pad, take copious notes as we go throughout this meeting, because this is all of our fight. If you're a descendant, if you know descendants, we want you to take ownership. We want you to ask all of the questions that you need to ask, and we'll definitely try to do the best that we can to address those issues. And so we have a phone number for the foundation. That number is right on the screen, 918-956-0544. And then if you have any questions that we won't be able to get to tonight, we need you to send us your questions at info@justiceforgreenwood.org. That's info@justiceforgreenwood.org. And just understand this, 10,000 victims were displaced during the massacre. And so I like to say that Greenwood, Black Wall Street, it spans across state lines. There's people from all over this country, and I'm so excited to say that we have national partners in this fight with us right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, like our very own Nicole Austin Hillary, who's with us in this meeting today. We just want to give you a huge shout out and thank you. The Human Rights Watch, they've been with us from day one, right here on ground in Tulsa, helping us with this fight for restitution, repair, and respect. And Nicole is the executive director for the Human Rights Watch United States Division. So thank you so much. We're honored to have attorney Brian Stevenson with the Equal Justice Initiative. He is the author of the book Just Mercy. A movie just came out at the beginning of last year where Michael B. Jordan played Brian Stevenson in that powerful film. And so we're so excited to have him on the team. As a matter of fact, on February the 1st, we're going to be launching an essay writing contest for Tulsa area high school students in partnership with EJI. They're going to be donating scholarship money. So stay tuned for that information if you have a child who goes to high school here in Tulsa. So Mr. Stevenson and his team at the Equal Justice Initiative, EJI, they have been with us from day one, and we're happy to have him on board. And also, the Black Wall Street Times, our media sponsor, where Nehemiah Frank is the editor-in-chief. You'll hear from him in just a little bit. He'll share some information with you on this evening, but understand this, Black media is very important in movement spaces like this. We have to start controlling the narrative and telling our stories our way, because what we know is that our history, the lives that were lost were erased. I did not learn about the massacre, and I'm a descendant. My grandmother, my great-grandmother was Rebecca Brown Crutcher, and I didn't know what happened to her because she was that fearful to speak on it again, and I didn't learn about it until I went off to college. And so we have to get good at controlling the narrative, and the Black Wall Street Times, they've been right there with us, and we're excited to have this up and coming digital publication in this fight with us. And so we're going to go ahead and jump into our legal update. And without further ado, it is my privilege, it is an honor, it is my pleasure to bring on the line the founder of the Justice for Greenwood Foundation and the lead attorney in this fight for restitution, repair, and respect. I can go on and on and on about attorney Demario Solomon Simmons, but I'm going to get right to the legal update. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Demario Solomon Simmons. The call is yours.
I appreciate it, Dr. Crutcher. Good evening, everybody. Everybody that's here, we appreciate you. I want you to put right now, #Justice for Greenwood. That is what we're here for. We're here to get justice for Greenwood and those who've been impacted by the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and just as importantly, the continuing harm. I want to just tell you real quickly some of the things that are going on with our legal case. I'm so excited about some new developments, and we have an opportunity to finally right a 100-year-old wrong. The first thing I want to talk about is what are the claims that we have. It is very important that we understand that our case is a legal case that has a precedent, has a roadmap, and we have an opportunity for success. This is a case that is for the community. It is for descendants. It is for survivors. It is for everyone that's ever been impacted by the massacre and everything that has happened since then. We know and understand that the devastation that happened in 1921 didn't stop there. We have emotional trauma. We have land loss. We have continued taking of businesses, business opportunities, disparate policing. All of that is coming from the massacre. And that's why we're producing or have filed a public nuisance lawsuit. A public nuisance lawsuit, which simply says that the city and other defendants, they created a problem. They created poverty. They created bad policing. They created bad roads. They created food deserts. They created lack of housing. They created lack of jobs in Greenwood. It is their doing, and they have a responsibility to repair that. The legal term is abated. We also are bringing an unjust enrichment claim. We're basically saying now those defendants, those perpetrators of the massacre, are now utilizing, they're saying they're leveraging the history to enrich themselves, for themselves, not for the descendants, not for the community, but for the same entities, the city, the county, and others we'll talk about later. They're enriching themselves off the narrative of the destruction that they caused. Now, if we go to the next slide, the most powerful thing about our case is that we have a clear precedent. Just in 2019, the state of Oklahoma, utilizing the exact same law, public nuisance law, run a verdict against Johnson & Johnson opioid company, $572 million. We are utilizing the same case, many of the same arguments, and at the time of this verdict, everyone in the state of Oklahoma, including those who we are suing today, they were all for the public nuisance law. And what does the public nuisance law say? It's right here on the screen. Oklahoma's public nuisance law partly defines a nuisance as an unlawfully doing an act or omitting to perform a duty that injures or endangers the comfort, health, or safety of others. A public nuisance is defined as an act or omission that affects an entire community or neighborhood. Now, if you believe that the massacre impacted the entire community, I need you to hashtag Justice for Greenwood right now, because the entire 10,000 people, as Tiffany said, was impacted. We don't know how many people were actually killed. It could have been thousands of people. We don't know. But we do know that thousands of Black Tulsans disappeared to never be in Tulsa again. We do know there was $50 to $100 million of property damage that was destroyed, never paid for. We do know that there were over 200 known businesses, and at least 30 to 40% of those businesses never, ever reopened. We do know at the time of the massacre that home ownership for Blacks and whites in Tulsa was about the same, but now whites own their homes 2 times, 3 times more likely to own a home than Black Tulsans. And the list goes on and on and on when we talk about this nuisance that was created. I know it's so many of the descendants that we've talked to over the last couple of years. I know how this has impacted your families. I know how this stole your wealth. I notice how it stole your ability to really fulfill your potential. I know you still want those claims to be paid. And this lawsuit is the vehicle to make that happen. Now I want to talk about who are our defendants, because I think it's very important that we understand it's not just one entity. Yes, the city of Tulsa is a defendant. Yes, the city of Tulsa deputized over 2,000 whites and poured them into our community, just like what we saw on January 6th, when white men mostly violently overthrew our United States Capitol. That was just a small microcosm of what happened in Greenwood. That was only just a small snapshot of what happened in Greenwood. And you have to understand that the city of Tulsa, they were integral in this. They had their police officers involved, their firefighters involved, their city leaders involved. The next defendant is the Tulsa Regional Chamber. The chamber was integrally involved in the massacre and everything that's happened since then. A lot of people don't understand that it was the chamber who took control of the city after the massacre. It was the chamber who decided that they were not going to accept any money from people from around the nation that was sending money in for Black victims. The chamber said, no, we don't want it, sent it back. It was the chamber that paid for the ID cards of Black internees who were in concentration camps. That's not my word. That's what they called it in 1921, the Tulsa World. Concentration camps, that Black people could not leave the concentration camp unless they had a pass that a white person signed off. And then they could go out and work as an indentured servitude, or what we call slavery. Or even worse, they had to work for the city. They had to work for the chamber to clean up the mess that the city made for free. They had to clean up their own community that was destroyed for free. And that went on for a long time. Our next defendant is the Tulsa Development Authority, also known as TDA. This entity was not around at the time of the massacre, but this entity was created by the city to further its long-term goal, which was to dispossess the valuable, beautiful land that the Black residents of Greenwood owned right in and next to downtown. That's what all of this has been about this whole entire 100 years. Dispossess us of land, send us further north, and make sure that we never build at what the Tulsa Tribune called, quote, old nigger town again. That's their words, not my words. Defendant number 4, the Tulsa Metropolitan Planning Commission. This is another entity that came about after the massacre, but this entity is a partnership between the county and the city, and they work hand in hand together with TDA to decide zoning rights and where they're going to put developments. Developments like the highway that smashed through Greenwood in the 60s, destroying whatever remnants were still available at that time. It was this entity that was involved in that. And that's why we say the continuing harm, not just what happened 100 years ago, but what is happening right to this very day. Our next defendant is the county, Tulsa County. The county was just as involved as the city, just as involved as the chamber, just as involved as the Oklahoma National Guard, which we're going to get to in a minute. They had their leaders there. They had their leadership there. They sanctioned what happened. And then guess what? After the massacre, with the city and the chamber and the county, they put together a county grand jury of all whites. And guess who they blamed? Guess who they blamed for the massacre? They blamed the black men. If you think that's wrong, Justice for Greenwood, hashtag. They blamed the black victims of Greenwood for what happened to them. And then they charged over 75 of our leaders, those that they did not kill, those who they had exiled, they charged them so they couldn't come back. They couldn't bring back their intellectual knowledge, their human capacity, their business acumen. All of that prevented us from being able to rebuild to where we were and where we could possibly be. When you think about a man like J.B. Stratford, the richest man in Greenwood, multimillionaire, owned the Stratford Hotel, the largest African-American owned hotel in the nation, totally penniless, ran to Chicago, never to come back, died heartbroken. Can you imagine what Stratford would be instead of seeing Hyatts everywhere, or in addition to seeing Hyatts and Hiltons and Marriotts, we may see Stratfords worldwide. That's what we lost. Next slide. Next defendant. We cannot forget the sheriff of Tulsa County. Not today's sheriff, but the sheriff's office. And that's the thing about the public nuisance law that's so powerful. We're not saying that these actual individuals are the ones that did what they did in 1921 to today, but we're saying the same entities are alive and well. And many of these same entities, and all of these same entities, are still providing a nuisance to the black folks of Greenwood and what later became North Tulsa. It was the sheriff who also had deputies involved in this particular massacre. It was the sheriff that did not do their job to protect the black citizens. It was the sheriff that allowed so many people's lives and dreams and hopes and potential to be destroyed. Justice for Greenwood. Justice for Greenwood. Next and last defendant that we have so far is the National Guard underneath the Oklahoma Military Department. The National Guard had a mandate. Their job was to come out and protect the citizens of Greenwood. But what they did, they got involved with the city. They got involved with the county. They got involved with the other defendants, and they started doing the killing, the looting, the burning, the destroying themselves. That is why we want to hold them accountable. That is why we say we cannot have these defendants, the same defendants that perpetrated the harm, to now be trying to benefit. Not trying to, they are benefiting off the backs, the blood, the bones, the stories of those they destroyed. It's unconscionable. It's unconscionable. But the good news is we have this lawsuit. The good news is we have some things that we're trying to get the court to give us as remedies to fix this nuisance. In other words, what are we asking for? Next slide. We're asking for a lot of things, but I just want to give you the highlights. Number one, we want a victims' compensation fund. We want a victims' compensation fund just like the victims' compensation fund for the 9/11 terrorist attacks, or the victim compensation fund for the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing terrorist attack. What happened in Oklahoma and Tulsa was a terrorist attack. We know who was destroyed. We know what was lost. We want those outstanding claims paid. We want a scholarship program put together for descendants and those impacted by the massacre. It doesn't matter if you're from Oklahoma or if you live in France now. We have descendants all around the world. You should be eligible for scholarships to make up for what you lost as a family. We want, if you live in Tulsa County or city of Tulsa, we're asking for immunity from all city taxes, city charges. If the city and the county owed our people for 100 years, and our people have been paying in every year over the last 100 years, if you think it's reasonable for the city to say, you know what, you don't owe us anymore for the next 100 years, I need you to drop a Justice for Greenwood, hashtag Justice for Greenwood. We're asking for a land trust to be established. We want all available land that is still in the Greenwood area put into that land trust for those descendants and those victims to have access to that land. That is what made Greenwood so great. It was 3 factors. Number 1, first and foremost, it was land ownership. Number 2, it was a freedom mind state. And number 3, it was cooperative economics. If you don't have land, it does not matter if you have a freedom mind state. It does not matter if you have cooperative economics. We must have an opportunity to own the land that our ancestors owned, built up, developed, and now is worth millions of dollars sitting in downtown Tulsa. We want next a level 1 hospital in the Black community. Do you understand that the North Tulsa, the Black community, is the only community here in Northeast Oklahoma that does not have a hospital? South Tulsa has maybe a dozen hospitals. Sand Springs has a hospital. There are hospitals in Glenpool and in Owasso and in Broken Arrow and all around us. But in North Tulsa, we have no hospital. Just like we have no grocery store, it's a food desert. This was all created because guess what? At the time of the massacre, we had a hospital. We had a hospital that was burnt down. We don't have a hospital. We need a hospital. We want the judge to order that the defendants do not be able to financially benefit at all from the massacre. Any money that goes to any of these defendants as they try to appropriate and leverage the massacre should go into that victims compensation fund for who? The victims. If you agree, hashtag Justice for Greenwood. And lastly, the last thing I want to highlight, this is very, very important. We want them to have to pay fair market value as they utilize the names, pictures, likenesses, and stories of massacre victims and other folks in North Tulsa. They don't have a right to take your story, tell the story, and make money off the story. That is your right. I'm telling all the descendants we talk to, do not give up your story for free. Do not give up your narrative for free. Do not give up your pictures for free. That is your legacy. And anyone that wants to use your intellectual property without giving you proper compensation, they're not your friend. They're just exploiting you, just how we've been exploited the last 100 years. Next slide. Real quickly, our latest case updates. We have some fantastic updates. Number 1, we've taken the first 2 and only 2 depositions ever given in this issue in the last 100 years. The first deposition was from our lead plaintiff, Mother Leslie Benefield Randall. If you show her slide, please. She's 107 years old. She stood toe-to-toe by Zoom, of course, answered those questions, told everybody what she experienced, what she heard. She said, I remember seeing black bodies in the street. I remember hearing the screams. I remember smelling the smoke. I remember running for our lives with my grandmother. I remember being in the internment camp as a little child. And then she told us how they took her house during urban renewal in 1980, took the land that her family had owned for over 75 years, moved her out north to way away from where she belonged, and took her land, and now her land is to some profitable white-owned business. And then we have our next survivor who did a deposition. Also a fantastic, unbelievable woman, another 107-year-old woman who will be 108 in May, Mother Viola Fletcher. This young lady lives alone. She can talk to you as if we're having a conversation right now. She was also able to tell her story, how her family, only thing they had was what's on their body, got into a covered wagon, went 40 miles to the east, and had to live in a tent. A tent. They were living in a house in Tulsa. They had furniture. They had clothes. They had income. but they got ran out of the community. She said, I was underneath with my siblings and I had a blanket over me and I was so scared I could hear everything. And I would look through that blanket and I would see something I never want to see again. I would see somebody dead. I would see my neighbor's house on fire. And they lived in a tent for 2 years trying to get back on their feet. Her parents never moved back to Tulsa, too scared to move back to Tulsa. She testified that if this wouldn't have happened to me, I could have finished school. She only went to the 4th grade. I could have had a better life for me and my family. This is why we're doing this case. Justice for Greenwood, hashtag, if this is making sense to you. Justice for Greenwood, hashtag, if you believe justice is due now, it's long overdue. So with all of that being said, we had a fantastic, unbelievable announcement this week that we've been working on for some time. We've been able to put together a magnificent legal team that's full of lawyers and academics and scholars from all around the world. And because of that, around our nation. And because of that, we've been able to do certain great things in research. Next slide. Yes, insurance. We've been able to track down some of the insurance companies that denied claims at that time. Next slide. So far, we've only found 3 of those insurance companies, but we're going to continue to find those insurance companies. And we've already sent letters to these insurance companies saying, hey, you didn't pay because of what the city said, that this was a riot, that the black folks was the cause of it. We know that's not true. We want you to pay. And so I'm asking anyone that's listening today, if you're a descendant or if you know a descendant that had a claim that was not paid and you have any of that information, please provide it to us, to the information we've provided, because this is something we're going after. Everybody that was involved, we want to hold accountable. And we had another great announcement this week. If you go to the next slide, that's going to help us hold people accountable even more. We already had a fantastic team of dedicated civil rights attorneys. We already had a fantastic team of scholars and academics. We already had a fantastic team of activists. And we added to our team one of the top law firms in the nation, if not the world, Schulte Walsh Zabel, effectively known as SRZ, an international law firm with over 450 attorneys who came on board, saw our case. We talked to them a couple months ago about one issue. And as they learned about Greenwood, as they learned about the injustice, they said, this is something we have to be involved in. We have to do this. Can we join the team? And of course, we were happy to bring them on the team and everything they bring to us. Next slide. Let's show the full lawyers on our team. Now, this is just the lawyers. We also have a lot of staff who are running this show tonight. But this is the lawyers on our team. We have law professors and lawyers from all over the nation with all type of expertise. This is because what we're doing is right and just. This is because racial equity has to happen. This is because if we can't win Tulsa, then we can't win the bigger racial equity fight in this nation. We're fighting for the soul of the nation, and Tulsa is where we start. But we're not fighting with some high academic discussion. We're talking about a public nuisance that needs to be abated. So the next slide, as I get ready to close out the legal update, I want to bring up McKenzie Haynes, because she's our contact at SRZ. She's the co-chair of the Racial Justice Initiative or Task Force. She's an outstanding lawyer, a passionate sister who is really down and loving to being a part of this Justice for Greenwood campaign. This is a campaign, a Justice for Greenwood campaign. So McKenzie, you already know I told you I'm so excited to have you on our team, so excited to have everybody on your law firm with us. So I just wanted to bring you on and let you say a little bit about yourself and why it was important for you personally to advocate for your firm to get involved, and what your firm, how you guys are seeing your role and what you want to accomplish in this case.
Well, thank you, DeMario. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Wow, where do I start? This is such an important opportunity, not just for our law firm, not just for me personally, but it's a really big step for the legal community broadly, especially the big law firms across this country that owe it to Black folks and owe it to the folks in Greenwood to do right and to create justice. There is something really special about being a part of a large law firm like Schulte, Roth, and Zabel. We have tremendous resources. We have brilliant attorneys that graduated from top institutions. We bring a plethora of resources, but really, at the end of the day, what's so important is that we use our knowledge, we use the law to create justice. And that justice has been so denied for so long. So for me, as a Black woman in America, as a Black attorney, it is so critical to make change and do right and bring justice where justice is due. So it really is an honor to be here, to be a part of this. We have a great team of attorneys. Everyone is extraordinarily passionate about everything that we're doing. We stay up late nights to, help with research, to get more information, to try to bring all of the resources to the table. And it really is a pleasure and an honor to work with other brilliant attorneys and DeMario to really bring some change. So I'm grateful. And I think that you will see, because of the full force of our law firm behind this case, that people are really going to start to listen. Because when you have a lot of lawyers, particularly from a big law firm like us, people come to the table because they don't want to spend time in court with us. So really grateful. Thank you, DeMario. Thank you, everyone, for having me, and really looking forward to getting justice here.
Thank you so much, McKenzie. Thank you so much. And before I bring Dr. Crutcher back on, I want to conclude my legal update saying we have an opportunity for victory. We have an opportunity to vindicate people like Dr. Olivia Hooker and so many others who fought so long to get the justice we so deserve. This is a vehicle. This is our foundation. This is our campaign. We want to put the survivors and descendants front and center, and we will be victorious. And if you believe we will be victorious, just hashtag Justice for Greenwood. And after you do that, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. You go to our website. We have some other fantastic updates that we're going to be sharing in the next couple of weeks. So just continue to support us, continue to pray for us. And with that, Dr. Crutcher, I yield my time and send it back to you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Attorney Solomon Simmons. Every time I hear the updates, I learn more and more and more. And I will challenge each and every one of you who's on the line. Go to the website, take a look at the lawsuit, read it for yourselves, because we have to make sure that we're all speaking the same language, because there's going to be some non-believers who are out there who's trying to say, oh, it's not feasible, this won't work. And so the fact that we have SRZ on board may just be a clue. The fact that we have the Human Rights Watch on board with us, that may be a clue. The fact that Brian Stevenson, one of the world-renowned attorney, is on board with us, that may be a clue. And so we're asking each and every one of you that's kind of straddling the fence to just simply believe with us, because I believe that we will get justice for Greenwood. And so what I want to do, I want to actually keep the meeting going along. I'm happy to see that we have Tori Tyson, who's joined us tonight. She's a third-generation business owner right in the heart of Black Wall Street. We have my first cousin, Candy Whitley, on the line, Candy Whitley White, who is also a descendant. So thank you all for joining us, and so many more. We're just so glad that you're here. But you may have seen in the news right here in Tulsa over the last few weeks, and what happened at the nation's capital with the insurrection, and our senator, James Lankford, who joined a group of senators to reject the election results, and he serves on the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Commission. And there's been a call by the descendants and the Black community right here in Tulsa for him to resign or step down, because when you go and you challenge election results, what you're simply saying is that Black votes don't matter and Black lives, they don't matter either. And so I'm going to stop. I don't want to steal our next speaker's thunder, but I want to bring on the line Mr. Nehemiah Frank, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times, who's been leading that effort, leading that fight to get Senator Lankford to step down, and so many others. So, Mr. Nehemiah Frank, I will turn the meeting over to you, sir.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Crutcher. Hello, everyone. I'm Nehemiah D. Frank, the founder and editor-in-chief of the Black Wall Street Times. I am the son of Richard Jones Cherry, the grandson of Edward Cha-Cha Cherry, the great-grandson of Gertrude Clark Cherry, and the great-great-grandson of William and Virginia Clark, who survived the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Both the Cherry and the Clark, my ancestors, lost property during the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Hence, I am a descendant, and yes, this is personal. I am here to continue making the case for why U.S. Senator James Lankford, a member of the Republican Party representing the state of Oklahoma, has always had blind spots when it comes to the sensitivity of Black Americans, and he is unqualified to heal a century of racial wounds caused by racism in Tulsa and the state he represents in Washington, D.C., as he is unstudied on Black American history. On the 99th anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, Senator Lankford published an open letter to the Ponca City Now publication. In his letter, Lankford states, and I quote, 99 years ago, almost to the day, North Tulsa/Greenwood was on fire. Today, South Minneapolis is on fire, end quote. Why would Senator Lankford choose to make a comparison between the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and a social justice movement that ended with two white allies who were murdered by a white teenager who wasn't even from the state, and a race massacre that ended with upwards of 300 Black people slaughtered, Black survivors herded like chattel enslaved people with their hands in the air to concentration camps, their homes and businesses bombed to ashes in the wake. Moreover, while white businesses in Minneapolis were able to file insurance claims and be paid, Black business owners from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre never received pay for their insurance claims. Lankford also stated, quote, people are hurting, crying out for peace, justice, and answers, end quote. Senator Lankford, white people aren't crying for justice. Black people are crying for racial justice. And we Black descendants of the race massacre have been crying for racial justice for 100 years. Far-right extremists attacked the Capitol on January 6th and killed a police officer, injured hundreds of other law enforcement officers, erected nooses, terrifying Black Americans as over 4,000 Black men, women, and children were lynched in front of white mobs. We were the witnesses of Confederate flags and anti-Semitism symbols when we saw the insurrection you helped incite. Senator Lankford has yet to address his own political base about the racial hatred that nearly overthrew our democracy. How out of touch can you be? 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. How out of touch can you be? Lankford also said, and I quote, we have made real racial progress over the last 100 years, end quote. Not in Oklahoma, not when we have the #1 prison population in the world, and not when it is disproportionately housing Black women and Black men, breaking up our Black families, the same motif we experienced during institutional slavery. Lankford also said, our nation has many Black law enforcement officers, business owners, elected officials, and community leaders. Segregation has ended, and our courts work to judge people based on the law and the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Tell that to Terrence Crutcher's sister, end quote. Black Oklahoma accounts for 7.1% of the population, yet nearly 25% of the prison population. Black children can't read, and Oklahoma prisons are preparing beds for them. There is a health disparity gap that is still 7 years wide. While Black Americans were disproportionately dying for COVID-19, Lankford welcomed with open arms the former President Donald J. Trump, a white supremacist. Lankford continues to flip-flop on race relations. I now regret ever publicly defending Senator Lankford against his base on his initial stance on the Juneteenth holiday, because he withdrew his support of the Juneteenth Amendment, citing financial cost to add a federal holiday. This, of course, makes complete sense because Senator Lankford does not support reparations for the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. He doesn't support reparations for the descendants of African enslaved people who built this nation for free and who built the building he gets to advocate against every time he represents the state of Oklahoma. Enslaved Black people built the Capitol. Lankford has proven time and time again that he is not for Black lives, nor the descendants of the massacre. His policy stances tell me that Lankford doesn't support racial unity. I believe I, a descendant, speak for the majority of the descendants and the living survivors that we want Lankford to resign from the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre Centennial Commission. I truly wish this commission would stand behind our wishes and ask for his resignation or push him out. Lankford needs to work on himself and the racism that is permeating his party.
Wow. Oh, thank you so much, Nehemiah Frank. Man, that was powerful. And I'm just going to put out this disclaimer right here, right now. I mean, you just outlined a lot of the disparities that we're facing as Blacks in Tulsa. They call it North Tulsa, and those railroad tracks that delineated in 1921 Black Wall Street from South Tulsa, the white side of town. Those railroad tracks still symbolize the same thing today. All you have to do is come to Tulsa and open up your eyes and see the continual harm that continues to take place, the children that continue to suffer. And so thank you for outlining that. And if you're not for accountability or compensation for the survivors that are still living, that are 106 years old, then you're an enemy of the Justice for Greenwood movement. And I'm just putting that out there right now. So again, thank you so much, Nehemiah. We're going to keep this meeting going. And man, I am so excited to bring on the call on the line, someone whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for, who is a researcher and advocate with the Human Rights Watch. And again, she was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and now she's doing what she's most passionate about, and that's fighting for justice, fighting for reparations. And I'm going to let her just give you all a brief update on what she's been doing. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Dreesen Heath with the Human Rights Watch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crutcher. That was a beautiful introduction from a beautiful person. I'm so delighted to be here and just feel very warm whenever I have a chance to be in community with Greenwood and with my Tulsa friends. As Tiffany mentioned, I was born in Tulsa, and while my family didn't stay here for long after my birth, you know that phrase, home is where the heart is, and Tulsa and its people definitely share a special place in my heart, and that's why I'm committed to this work. At Human Rights Watch, within our U.S. program, I work on racial justice issues within the U.S. and lead our reparative justice research and advocacy. We are an international nonpartisan organization working in over 90 countries that investigates human rights violations and demands accountability and redress for those harms within communities. We've been partners and friends with this community for several years now, given the work of my colleagues, John Rafling and Brian Root, in exposing how abusive policing has destroyed lives in Tulsa, particularly Black and poor communities in North Tulsa, and how poverty and racial inequality has really diminished the quality of life and ability to thrive for Black Tulsans in particular. So building off of that work, in May 2020, ahead of the 99th mark of the 1921 race massacre, we issued another major report entitled The Case for Reparations in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a Human Rights Argument, which called directly on the state of Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa to provide immediate reparations for the massacre to the living survivors and descendants of the massacre, but also a comprehensive reparations plan for the entire Black community. Demario and Nehemiah did such a thorough recap of the harms related to the massacre itself, which our report also documents. I will not go into that. But if you've been in the archives like me, you'll know Tulsa City officials promised full restitution post the massacre, but instead worked to block financial contributions, including medical help, and prevented rebuilding efforts, even ordering Black Tulsans into poor conditions and concentration camps. But our report also documents the continual harm of the massacre, the racial violence following the massacre in the form of redlining, urban renewal, or urban removal, highway construction that runs through the heart of Greenwood that displaced families, university construction of OSU Tulsa and Langston University Tulsa that claimed land of the historic district, rezoning of the district boundaries, other discriminatory policies, de facto segregation, police violence, gentrification disguised as economic development, and structural racism. All of these are government actions that have left Black Tulsans, particularly those in North Tulsa, with a lower life expectancy, lower standard of living, and fewer opportunities than other Tulsans, particularly those south of the highway. And these are racial disparities that span across the city, across multiple indicators, from health to nutritious food to education. But I want to take a step back quickly and explain why we call for reparations for the massacre and a comprehensive reparations plan. The right to reparation and remedy, you all should know, is well defined in international human rights law and provides a roadmap for communities to determine their recipe for repair. There are 5 key elements: restitution, restoring a community back to a morally acceptable place, and in the case of Greenwood, back to its economic standing. There's compensation, which is economically accessible damage, also compensation for lost opportunity and moral losses, as well as property loss. Rehabilitation is the third pillar, mental health programming and other investments in social and legal services, as well as satisfaction, which is defined as apologies, memorials, and markers, and also guarantees of non-repetition, which is basically institutional reform and gets the heart of what we need to do to make sure that the assault on Black people in this country ends. Reparations is a necessary requirement on the pathway to healing and closes those racial equity gaps, but it must be in consultation with the community. And communities deserve to be whole, and they have a right to seek remedy for those harms. So governments have a responsibility to provide these types of repair measures in addition to adequate investments in social support programming. So our work has already gotten the attention of the federal government and international mechanisms, and this community's legacy has heavily informed the first ever joint resolution in US Congress that acknowledged the race massacre as an act of state-sanctioned violence. There's plans to hold hearings and also clear the legal barriers at the federal level for survivors and descendants to pursue those legal claims. Various international bodies are eager to support you all on your quest for justice. And as I said at the Juneteenth rally in Tulsa, if we don't get justice done in Tulsa, we will not see full justice anywhere else. So again, honored and humbling to support this work. Thank you to Demario and Dr. Crutcher and the Justice for Greenwood team, really for your awe-inspiring leadership. And let's get justice for Greenwood.
Dr. Crutcher, you're muted.
I am so sorry. I was talking real good too, but thank you so much, Dreesen, for that wonderful update from the Human Rights Watch. We're just so grateful for our team and our partners there. And so I'd like to bring on the line my colleague, DJ Mercer, who is on the board of directors for the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. And he is also the Descendant coordinator. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Crutcher. Each monthly town hall, we have a Descendant Spotlight, and today's spotlight is for and with Guy Troop. He is a business owner. He owns the Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge. So if you are in Tulsa or in Oklahoma, please go to the Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge. So I'd like to introduce Guy Troop right now. So Guy, besides you being connected to Greenwood through your business, tell us how else you're connected to Greenwood.
Well, I grew up in Tulsa, like many. What I saw in the 70s and the 80s as a youth did not connect with the stories that my grandparents told me. I was not aware of the bright, rich tradition of Greenwood because all I saw was blight. And I'm second generation Black Wall Street. My great aunt owned a beauty school and a beauty shop called Troops Beauty College that she actually purchased from Madam C.J. Walker.
Awesome. So before we go to the Washington Post article, I wanted to shout out a couple of descendants that are on this call right now. I'd like to shout out Eloise Price Rowland, as well as Maureen Scott. I've seen you all post hashtag Justice for Greenwood. It's good to see you all, and hello. So recently, Guy, there was a Washington Post article that you were featured in. It's called The Whitewashing of Black Wall Street. It's by Tracy Jan, and it's very powerful. If you all haven't read it, Google it after this and read the entire thing. It's very powerful and very poignant. But in there, Chad, if you could bring up the next slide, please. There's a quote, and the quote says, "It's hard to stomach the idea that a museum and tourism will fix the challenge of systematic racism. I came to take back what's rightfully ours. Who owns in there? It's not us." What did you mean with that, and why is it important for Black people to own things?
Well, it's important because the history of this country has shown us that we're outside looking in. So if you go as far back as the original Constitution, 3/5 of a man, Plessy versus Ferguson, justifying segregation, separate but equal, so-called separate but equal. The 21 Race Massacre, this attack on a group of successful people, it actually calls into question free enterprise, right? And whether or not we really are free in this country today. 74 million people voted for a person that we all now know was incompetent to lead the country. And so that it's important for us to start with the problem, which is systemic racism, institutional racism, so-called white supremacy. I won't allow that to come out of my mouth. It's so-called white supremacy, but it shows up in our politics, in our economics, in our churches, in our families even. And so what I really wanted to say there is enough is enough. Accountability is mandatory in this scenario. And how do we start? There's plenty of land. Stop hoarding the land and grant it back to its rightful owners. Okay. Stop all of the unsavory business practices of banks and loans, and just do right. Do the right thing in this economic space. So I believe the collective economics starts with us. And I'm excited about the entrepreneurial spirit of people that I see opening businesses, people like Tori on the line, people like Max Wings and Waffle That, and all of these small little enterprises that if we come together, we can recreate the spirit and the prosperity of historic Black Wall Street and Greenwood.
Thank you. That's very, very powerful. And before we transition, there's one more part. In the first part of this quote, it says, "It's hard to stomach the idea that a museum and tourism will fix the challenge of systematic racism." Can you expound upon that and why that won't fix it?
Well, I feel like that is the strategy of the city to tell a story, and it's a lightweight apology. But the real apology is in the pocket, right? If you really want to make this right, don't give me a quote that the forefathers are not the engine to what's going on in wealth in this city, right? So my forefathers and foremothers were rich as well, but you ruined it. And if you keep moving forward and you really think a museum that we go look at our history that we all now know, and a little bit of tourism dollars where outsiders can come in and see what's happening and say, oh, worries me, or that was a shame. No, it starts in our community with our people, brilliant minds north of Archer. Pour into the 16-year-old Bill Gates. Pour into the 22-year-old Oprah Winfrey. And if we do that, we know we have diamonds here. We're resilient people. So it's just a tragedy to me that we believe that a museum is and tourism dollars is the solution to a massacre.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. For those of you, as I said before, if you're in Tulsa, if you're in Oklahoma, if you're thinking about coming to Tulsa, come to Greenwood, and please visit Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge. It's a great facility. Thank you, Mr. Troop. Chad, if you go to the next slide, please. So if you are a descendant, please reach out to us at info@justiceforgreenwood.org. If you have any claims, anything you think is important, email it to us and we'll get in contact with you to really ensure that, one, we're fighting the fight, but also to just ensure that you all get your just due. So we have a little bit of a surprise for you today. We have a survivor with us currently right now on this call. So Mr. Hughes Van Ellis, he is a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre. He turned 100 years old recently, and he lives in Denver, Colorado, and the news outlet there did a spotlight for him. And we are just very honored to have him in our present today. This king, this man, he fought for America's freedom. He fought Nazis, and then he comes back to America and they tell him, thank you, and pat on the back. But we know there needs to be more for him. So Chad, can you please play the video?
In May 1943, Hughes Van Ellis was officially introduced to World War II. That's the day he was drafted into the United States Army.
You have to do what you have to do, you know. You got to go serve your country.
Trained in the infantry, his specialty became anti-aircraft artillery and was attached to the 234th AAA Gun Battalion.
I get the sound of that plane. Then I get to look at, and I would tell the gunners how close that plane would come in.
Ellis was shipped out to the CBI Theater of Operations. That would be China, Burma, and India. There, he fought the Japanese Imperial forces.
A lot of soldiers get nervous and, you know, get shook up, but some reason you just don't feel like that. You feel you got to do the do, and you just have to go and do it.
The 234th was an all-black unit, except for one white captain. It was a segregated outfit.
It ain't like today. You just going to have to do what you have to do. You just go by orders. You ordered to do something, you just have to do it.
Ellis fought an enemy who believed in racial purity, while the army in which he served was, in fact, segregated.
You can speak up today and speak your opinion, but back then, you just never thought about it.
Ellis and his fellow soldiers fought on and played an important role in the ultimate victory over the Axis powers. Now, at 100 years and 1 week old, Hughes Van Ellis is in excellent health, is surrounded by a loving family, and has a positive but grounded attitude on life.
How do you feel to be 100?
I feel great.
You feel great?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Mr. Ellis. And thank you. Dan DeRue, Fox 31.
And without further ado, let's do a round of applause, hashtag Justice for Greenwood, for Mr. Hughes Van Ellis. Yes, awesome.
Can you see us?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay, great.
Hi, Mr. Hughes, how are you?
Wait, I'm fine. Wait.
This is why we fight right here, for our survivors, for our descendants, for him, for all of us. Mr. Hughes Ellis, would you like to say anything right now?
Back pardon?
Would you like to say anything?
Would you like to say anything? Talk.
Yes. It's a pleasure for me to be on, and history tells the truth.
Yes, history does tell the truth.
That live to see this again. And my sister Viola, 106. So we just blessed to be here and hear the history of this. And it actually happened. I appreciate you guys for doing this for us. Brings it to the light. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir. It is our honor and our privilege. We appreciate you, and this is why we fight. Thank you, Mr. Ellis, for your service. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for being you.
Thank you so much for the honor.
You're very welcome. It's pleasure's all ours, I'm sure. So with that, I would like to transition to Dr. Crutcher, who will wrap us up our presentation today. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Mr. Mercer. I have chills just hearing from another survivor that we didn't know about until just recently. He was 6 months old, and had to flee, with his parents in fear of his life, and he survived, and he's still here. And I want for you all, if you're on Twitter, to tweet out his comment. His comment was, "History tells the truth." Give him credit for it and put hashtag Justice for Greenwood. History tells the truth, and that's what the Justice for Greenwood Foundation is all about. And I want to just give another shout out to Guy Troop. Thank you so much for coming on. And if you're on Twitter, tweet out one of his quotes. He said, "The real apology is in the pocket." The real apology is in the pocket. We're here fighting for repair, respect, and for restitution for Van Hughes Ellis and his descendant, Maylee Craft. Thank you for getting him on, and his sister, who's 106, Mother Fletcher, and Mother Leslie B. Randall, and all of the descendants that are on here. We honor you on this evening, and this is who we're fighting for. And so thank you so much for your service. And what I want for you all to do right now is make sure that you share this live as you're watching, and hashtag Justice for Greenwood, because we want for this information to be disseminated all over the world. And if everyone who's on this call right now will do that right now as we speak, we can get the word out, because there's an old African proverb that says, when spider webs come together, they can tie up a lion. And I believe that all of us working together, we can slay this giant. And I believe we're going to get justice, and we're going to have the victory here for these survivors. And so what I want to do now, and I know there's a lot of action steps, but I need for us to take ownership. This is a community foundation. This is your foundation, and we need each and every one of you getting involved. I'm happy to see my BTW alumni on the line, Reginald Mays, the Hornet Silencing Hate, and that group. They've been vocal. They've been helping us. So thank you all for joining. But I want for you to go right now and fill out a survey, because everything that we've heard on this line tonight, Tulsa owes. It's simple as that. We need to tell Mayor Bynum, who is the CEO of this city, that Tulsa owes. And so we want you to fill out a survey before you get off this call. And that URL is www.tinyurl.com/Tulsa owes. And we need you to fill out that survey right now. And as you fill out that survey, just run and grab a pen. We want to share this brief video.
What about reparations in this area?
I don't have it. I know people have opinions on both sides when it comes to reparations, but the things I'm focused on, that's just not cash payments to people.
Lives, homes, and property were lost in the race massacre of 1921, and no one was held accountable.
And as a mayor, I hate that. I don't want Tulsa to be a city where the bad guys win. getting into trying to make cash payments to people, it divides the community on something that we really need to be united around.
Wow. Everyone, we can't let the bad guys win. We cannot. If that doesn't get you fired up to act and to take action, we understand that this fight for justice isn't free. There are so many different ways you can act. But what I'm going to do is challenge everyone right now to make a donation to the Justice for Greenwood Foundation. And it can be as small as $19.21. $19.21. I tried to just lead from the front, and I made a donation right out the gate for $1,000. But right now, as we encroach the 100-year anniversary of the worst domestic terrorist attack on U.S. soil, and it was against Black people, it was against Mr. Hughes Ellis, it was against Mother Randall, Olivia Hooker, Otis T. Clark. We need for you all to go ahead and put your money where your mouth is, because we know we're going to need all the resources possible. Again, I'm excited for the New York-based law firm who's coming on to help us and all of our national partners. But we have to invest in us. This is about us against them at this point. And you saw that picture of Mayor Bynum with ex-President Trump. He doesn't even get the honor for me to call him President Trump, ex-President Trump right there. And so I need for you to go to justiceforgreenwood.org and make your donation, make it a recurring donation, or $192.10, or even if it's in your budget, $1,921 in honor of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, so we can keep this fight for justice going. And also, just a few more action steps. Make sure you fill out that survey. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you hashtag Justice for Greenwood, and make sure you follow us and hit like on our social media platforms. On Twitter, you can find us at @4 Greenwood. That's Just for Greenwood. And then on Instagram and Facebook, Justice for Greenwood, and that's Justice FOR Greenwood. And so we need for you all to get involved, because guess what? Greenwood is still burning. Greenwood is still burning. And you can go back to that next slide so people can get it in their spirit. Get that fire burning in your belly. This is who we're fighting for. We must cultivate a sense of urgency, because we don't know how long these individuals have. Every day is a gift. And this is who we fight for. So understand that this isn't just a moment. Demario, Solomon Simmons, I just want to just show you deference, because you were on the team before when these survivors were denied at the U.S. Supreme Court, and you mustered up the courage to take on this fight yet again, and we're coming stronger than ever before. And again, we can't let the bad guys win. Greenwood is still burning. This is ground zero. Black Wall Street is a crime scene, and we all have to rise up. There's no Greenwood rising when Blacks don't own anything, when gentrification is rampant, when we don't have a quality grocery store, when educational resources are sparse. We have to take ownership, as Guy said. Whenever there's a community issue, it requires a community response. And so we've given you your action steps. We want to see you next month on February the 25th. Bring somebody. I'm sure there's some other survivors out there that we don't know about. Make sure that you get with DJ, our Descendant coordinator, get your pictures. We're not going to let anybody exploit our history on our watch another day. And make sure that you call for the commissioners to tell Senator James Lankford to resign. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you next month, same time, same place. God bless you all. Good night.